Hello, this is Nancy Smith-Maddox with Shine Your Light Radio Ministry, broadcasting from Little Rock, Arkansas, on WYTV7, the Christian Broadcast Network. I'm so excited to be here, so excited to start the Shine Your Light Radio Ministry, which will absolutely shine the light of anyone that I interview. I'm trying to go out into the world and reach people so they can shine their light to the world and let people know what their ministry is and what their mantra is, so we can absolutely spread the word of the gospel. My first guest is John P. Dennis. He is a #1 Amazon best-selling author from Atlanta, Georgia. He's the president of the Georgia Writers Museum and founder of Insight TMC LLC. He has a lot to share with us today, and I'm so happy that he's decided to come on and be on the interview. John, are you there?
I'm here, and thank you for having me, Nancy. This is fantastic.
Okay, well, I'm just really excited. I'm ready to get started. I don't want anyone to miss anything that you have to say. So can we start out by you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I was raised in a single-parent home. Mom and Dad divorced when I was 6 years old, and that sent me through a whole world of challenges and demands on my life and, of course, on my mom. There were 3 boys and a girl, so she had a full load. And we went through a lot of stuff. It'll come up later in our conversation, so I won't cover it here. But I grew on up, went into the Air Force, and had a great career in the Air Force as an air traffic controller, and then went on to work for the federal government, Department of Defense, and then Boeing and Northrop Grumman. Great career as an aviation executive type. And later on, I had my own kids in my first marriage, 3 boys again, and we adopted a daughter. And that marriage ended with the pain of divorce. And so that caused me to revisit some of the issues that I had always had a concern about when I was in the home when divorce took place. And so life kept going, and God was still good and gracious through it all. But I found that when I met the lady that is now my current wife, she already had a young son in the home. And we had just long, great talks and really things that I didn't know were that meaningful to me that just kept coming up. And she sat me down one day and she said, honey, she said, I believe you should write a book because I have never heard what you are saying. And all the single ladies out here, they need to hear your message. And, I'm a good husband. When my wife tells me to do something, I do it. So I sat down and I wrote the book, Men Raised by Women. And because I had seen so much from the years of mentoring young men in the military and volunteering in the Big Brothers programs at schools and even work I did in the prisons and work release centers volunteering, because what I found out is that my heart was already working in that arena in my off time. In my pastime, I was going into school, I was mentoring, because I cared so much about folks that didn't have someone there to guide them. And I was responding to the anguish I had grown up with and dealing with that myself. And so it took me to a great place of service and ministry. And when I wrote that book, I really was in the process of starting my aviation firm. But that book, I didn't do much of anything marketing it. I just released it, and it went to #1 on Amazon in the first 24 hours. And that's when I stopped everything, and I said, well, now it's a little bit more serious, because I kind of feel like God has chimed in and said, son, you're serving a primary need, and so I need you to pay attention. And so that's why I'm here. I'm paying attention. I want to serve in any way I can.
Oh, John, that sounds wonderful. Our amazing God is working.
Oh, yeah.
Our amazing God is working through you and speaking through you. to the children and the single parents. It's just fantastic. I have had an opportunity to take a look at the book, and I have a few questions regarding the book that really intrigued me. To go to a #1 Amazon bestseller in 24 hours is absolutely unheard of. So we have to know that that's God's path for you. That's the only way that can happen. So I'm just very excited. I noticed when I was reading up on your book that you said that starting a deficit in a masculine development, that you were trying to teach the children, the young men, that. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a very big deal. And when I talk to men, they all nod their head and they say, "Oh my Lord, you put your finger right on it." Because, there's people out there that are gay or homosexual and all that, and they think that I'm coming after them. This is not about any of that. This is about a young lion never seeing a male lion in his presence and learning the things you would have learned, knowing the things you would have known just from the presence, just from the difference of perspective and opinion and posture and how you carry yourself in the realm of a family and in the realm of society. And how will you know how to deal with a lady if a lady only tells you what she wants you to know? You'll never know the counter versions, because there are some ladies that cause problems, and there are some men that have to learn to work in balance in a relationship like that, how to tone the lady down or how to be in partnership with someone that tries to manipulate you, and maybe you don't learn it. And so if you grew up in a household with just a matriarch there, you have already submitted yourself to a lady's lead. And what we find is these guys never emerge in their leadership capacity in the home. And by leading, we have this great conversation with ladies, by leading, I mean serving, because they have only been served by their mother, and their mother has created in them a timidness that is only all about them getting their needs satisfied. Instead of serving the family, sacrificing for the family, watching out for the family, they're looking for and attracted to women that are dominant, that don't know how to cooperate and don't know how to, and those women are actually prone to attach to men like this. And so the cycle keeps repeating itself over and over again. And what happens is he's still a lion. And as he gets older, the instinctual nature in a human being, the things that are in your DNA, the things that God shaped you to be, they still try to emerge. Even if you were not given all the advantages that you should have had in having a male, a mentor, a father, a development pieces, they still try to emerge. And when they do, it changes that whole relationship, and it causes that relationship to fail because he cannot accept the role that they're giving him, and he's not trained in the role that he needs to step in. So it just introduces so much confusion. And so that's what I work on. I work on targeting what's happening deep down in there. Now, that's a big, vague description, and I promise you, I will get down to the details so that people understand, because we can all talk this stuff. We can all say, oh yeah, but I'm going to get down to the living room and to the bedrooms and what's happening with folks so that we know we are putting our finger on the issue. Absolutely.
And that's why this is so important. It's a multi-level issues and problems that you're addressing here. There's another one that I read about that says that you also teach the ladies or the single moms the struggle with dating these men that are in what you just talked about. They've been raised by mothers. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, on how you teach the ladies when they're starting to date these kind of men, what the issues are?
Absolutely. And so, for sake of compressing it, we call these guys MRWs. men raised by women. And they have these patterns and these attributes. And they emerge very easily when they're adults and these ladies date them, and these guys have become master manipulators. And we see it everywhere. You can have a girl in college about to graduate and become a doctor, and she can date a guy who has little to no aptitude or future, and she's absolutely smitten by him. She believes everything he says. He can pull her off track and derail her just because he has learned to be a master manipulator of women. He knows how to smell good. He knows what women like. He's monitored his mother in conversations. Ladies often tell me, "Oh, I can teach my son how to treat women." You end up teaching him what he needs to know to manipulate women. And so he takes the information that you've shared with him where you thought you were going to make him into a great husband and a partner, and he uses it to get what he wants because he's inherently selfish and he's avoiding responsibilities in the family. So that's a whole big dissertation again. So I narrow that down because we're dealing with practical people living practical lives. And so if you want to spot this guy, I give you a checklist, and we call this guy a post-dated check. Now, you and I know what a post-dated check is. I found out at one conference. The young people nowadays don't use checks, so I had a question mark. Like, what's a check? But it's just that. His behavior is the same as a post-dated check. He will not have any value right now. And so he's promising to have some kind of great value in the future. And he's trying to trade you right now. I want you to invest in this relationship. And I'm going to invest too, but I'm going to use a post-dated check. So you're going to actually give real life, real currency, real time, real money spent, real sharing of your home and resources, and he's just promising to do it later. But he brings no actual value now. And you can spot him in the first 10 seconds. All you have to do is keep giving him what I call a now test. What are you doing right now? Don't show me anything that you're promising in the future, just now. And they absolutely can't pass it. They cannot do it. They're all promises. They're all and some of the guys aren't lying. They actually have the ability to keep ginning up new versions of the future they just hope will happen, but they don't put any effort into it. They never do any research. They've never checked behind. They've never developed a network. They haven't done anything. They're just there to get what they want out of the relationship with the girls. And
yes, sir.
You see it so often. They move in with them. I've seen a guy who, the girl bought a car. She already had a car. She bought another car and let him use her car because he didn't have a car. And so then he went out and bought a motorcycle with his money. And moved in with her, and she is in the process of buying the house, and he's going to move in with her. And they can't. The cycle is hard for these young folks to detect because the young girl came from a matriarchal household where her mother carried the household and was a single parent, and so nothing about it is triggering a sense of alarm for her.
Yes.
And these systems are they're perpetuating themselves.
Well, it sounds like the book is very fascinating, and you've done a lot of research. And what I like about it is you've used your own experiences to research and develop this that can help so many people. You also said in one excerpt that the greatest pain in your life was the beginning of the greatest calling in your life. And I wish you could elaborate on that just a little bit. And you also mentioned your burden. This is a burden you have. So could you kind of elaborate a little bit on those two things?
And so what is it like to not have your father available? That's what I went through. It is not a one-time pain. It's an absent person at the table. it's an absent person. As I was winning all of these awards in academics, I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't misbehaved. I wasn't anything. I was great by all the measures that you measure a kid. Good grades, good behavior, respectful, Christian, all these fantastic things. And I was in pain and took great efforts to try and address that pain with relationships, with going out and trying to connect with other men and try to have a mentor in my life. And that pain remained there, nagging at me until I turned about 30 years old. I sat down to write a letter to my father, and when I finished, it was 5 pages front and back. And I needed to forgive him. And when I saw how much release I accomplished in that, I knew that I had been carrying the loss of his presence with me. And that burden is in the hearts of so many adult men today. They carry the anguish of not having their father, of not having the example. I would get in arguments with my first wife sometimes and not know what to do. Should I escalate it? Should I get more bold? Should I throw the coffee pot? Should I just sit quietly? I had no example to draw from. And I had this, you're a male, you trigger differently. I had this power rising up in me, this aggression just building and building, and I was afraid of it. I was afraid, I don't want to get violent. I don't want to be the man that's violent with his wife. But had no training in the arena, and none. You just have whatever your mother taught you, and she could never address this. This is very different. You know, her ability to just keep talking and talking and talking was actually driving me deeper and deeper into recessing and getting and building and anger. And so I needed a man to tell me, what do you do with that? What do you do? And so I deliberately learned it. Got books, I went and researched it, and I taught it specifically to my sons, and I modeled it to my sons. Hey, sometimes ladies are going to be this way once a month, if you know what I mean. They're, you know, some people are much more dramatic, and you don't need to let that turn into something if you know that's coming. This is what being a man is. You're here to serve. You're here to know the needs of your family and to work to meet those needs. And things as simple as that were just a pain, because when you walked away not knowing what to do, now a lot of times I did the right thing, but because I didn't know it was the right thing, it left me in turmoil. I didn't have a settled heart and a spirit. And so sometimes I would try different things. I would just try, okay, well, let me try this then. Let me throw the pillow, you know, and then you throw the pillow, and then that worked, and then you're like, I don't want to be that kind of person now. And so all these, the lack, the section in the book, I talk about a man without a model. It is a terrible, confusing issue. And so I found myself, it really is. It really is. When you don't know where you should step, when you take a step, when there's no footprint ahead of you that you can step into, then you're just experimenting with how to solve the relational issues that arise. And those are the big ones. You know, those are the ones that hold relationships together. Do you never speak to a person again? Or do you go tell them, hey, we had a difference, and let's just try to talk it out. We'll never agree on everything. And so, or do you have the common attributes of the way a lady communicates, or do you communicate like a man does? And, you know, it was really interesting when I was stationed in Japan. Many of us young GIs, 19, 20 years old, the ladies we were dating were usually Japanese. And so I went out to dinner one night with some of my buddies that were Japanese that worked with us on the base. And we were speaking Japanese, limited. I'm not that good at it. And he told me, one of the guys told me something very, very telling, and I think it fits in all this. He said, you know what? He said, I don't mean this to hurt y'all's feelings. He said that all the guys on the base, y'all talk like women. And it wasn't that any of us were anything. It was because we were taught to speak English by our girlfriends. And so we had the speech patterns and the behaviors that came directly out of who taught us. And so that's the tracing that I do and to work there. So it gets so much traction. I'm going to answer the latter part of your question. It became a calling. I was always going to do it for my sons. It became a calling when it went to number one on Amazon. When I was invited to a conference and the room filled up with people standing against the walls, and then the cameraman told me there was a line outside the door that was more than the number of people in the room, and they got turned away. When a teenage boy read my book and took it to his mother and said, "Mom, I want you to buy this." When my own son read the book 4 chapters straight on his first sitting and looked up and told me, "Dad, this is us." It became one when people started telling me this is what I needed. And so I won't ignore that because I know what I needed, and I deliberately tried to write the book that I wish my mother had in her possession when she was raising us.
Good. Well, this is Nancy Smith Maddox again with Shine Your Light Radio Ministry on WYTV 7. And my guest today is John P. Dennis. He's telling us a fantastic story. I'm so excited. He has his book, Men Raised by Women, What He Won't Tell Mom. And it is basically a straight talk guide for single parents, especially women, as well as men that were raised by women. So it's very exciting to hear this and to hear how God is speaking through him using his own experiences to reach his calling of what he's doing. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, John, if you don't mind. I'd like for you to speak a little bit about the Georgia Writers Museum, which you're the president of. You've been very excited about that, and I'd like to find out a little bit more about the Georgia Writers Museum that you're involved with and the president of. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, and these things are all connected, right? I was an aviation professional that wrote a book called Men Raised by Women, and all of a sudden I get connected with this Georgia Writers Museum, and so I go down and I do a book signing event there, and pack the place out, and afterwards they approached me, and they said, "Hey, we really like who you are." I have a pretty, influential resume with all the little corporate stuff on there. And so I really thought that's what they really loved about me. I came to find out later, they said, "We have never seen a crowd that large." They said, whatever you do to draw people is really what we want to be connected to. And so it was very interesting. Even more interesting is I didn't really do anything. It was God doing it again. So I got connected with these folks, and the museum is centered around Alice Walker, and that's her hometown, Eatonton, Georgia, where it's located. Joel Chandler Harris, that was his hometown, and he released Uncle Remus Tales, and Flannery O'Connor, very nearby out of Milledgeville. And so those 3 writers are anchored in that little bitty small town right there on the edge of what we call Lake Country. Big old Pony and Lake Sinclair is there. And so I got involved with them, and a couple months into it, they asked me to become the president of the museum. And that's God giving me some more promotion and some more ways to serve. And so we reach out across the state promoting literacy and our literary heritage in Georgia and promote Georgia authors. And we bring in world-class authors that are from Georgia and let young people meet them and let them get into this that written word that carries for generation and generation, because there's so much of the video and all these online things that kids get into. And so we want to keep them connected to the written word as well as a great form of transmitting a referral and capturing information and understanding and imagination. So, yeah, that's the Georgia Writers Museum.
Thank you so much. I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. I'm an avid reader myself, and what I found is that literacy and reading never goes out of style. And I'm an avid book collector, so I want my children and my grandchildren to understand that books are important and that we do need to keep that into us. That's why these museums are so important. So that's very exciting. And we're almost out of time, but I wanted to just say again that I'm Nancy Smith Maddox with Shine Your Light Radio Ministry on WYTV7, the Christian Broadcast Network, and my guest is John P. Dennis. And I have one more question that I would like to ask you, John, and that's I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit about your new company called Insight TMC LLC. And it looks like you went from the military to the DOD to being an author to be a consultant to be a speaker, and now you've created yet another company. Could you give us a little bit of insight and plug that Insight TMC for yourself?
So Insight is my consulting firm, and it is an aviation consulting firm. It's intended to bring in aviation experts into arenas where you don't have airfields, and so we could go all over the world, and I have a network of special forces gentlemen and aviation pilots and defense contractors and folks, so that we could go in and bring aviation ability to your location in a very short amount of time with very high-level experts. And my effort creating mentoring systems for boys and schools and all that is an extension of the business. The Men Raised by Women and my second upcoming mentoring program called Man-Made, they're all the charitable arm of this business entity, but the charitable arm part has outgrown the launch of the business, and so Insight sits there. It's a true entity, but I haven't even gotten to trigger it much because we have to attend to the calling first, and so and maybe only the calling will get the attention. So.
Okay, John, I'd like for you to give a few little words about encouraging the audience and letting them know anything that you would like to say as we close out this show.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find my book on Amazon. You can look me up on Facebook at John P. Dennis. You can also look me up on the web at my website, www.johnp.com, and see all the different things I've been blessed to work in. The major thing I want moms to understand and plug into is, and maybe I should have done this earlier, is they construct a straw man to support themselves, to figure out how they're going to provide, how they're going to protect the family, how they're going to deal with all these different issues. And anytime you plug your son into one of those roles, it undermines his development. So there's 5 things. When we get a chance to do another interview, if I get invited back, we'll cover those 5, because that's really at the heart of all the material. So you don't just know what's going wrong, you know how to make it go right. And so God bless you, and that's a good jump start.
Well, God bless you, John. I thank you so much. And again, I want to say one more time, it's Nancy Smith Maddox with Shine Your Light Radio Ministry, WYTV7, the Christian Broadcast Network, and I'm recording from Little Rock, Arkansas. And I would encourage each and every person that has heard this interview, and if you listen to it at a later date, to go to Amazon.com and order Men Raised by Women, What He Won't Tell Mom. Very, very critical book for the environment that we're in, and how our young men are being raised, and how our young men are trying to turn into the masters and the lions. So let's take advantage of that if we could. And I thank you again, John, so much. God bless you, and we'll be speaking again. I appreciate it so much. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.